Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. Thanks again for making this one of the most downloaded podcasts about the future of work. If you enjoy what we do, please like, comment, and share in your favorite podcast app. And we'll keep sharing great conversations like the one we have for today. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. I'm also an investor in and advisor to more than 30 AI-first companies, and as you know, a firm believer in the power of technology to make humans better. If you're passionate about changing the world with AI, or maybe just looking for your next adventure, let's talk. Now, we learn from AI thought leaders weekly on this show, and of course, the added bonus is you get one AI fun fact each week. Today's fun fact: Lance Elliott, AI researcher and Forbes author, whose work I've actually been referencing quite a bit lately, published an interesting article this week discussing a poorly understood aspect of ChatGPT. Now, in Silicon Valley, where I'm taping this, we commonly use this cliche: if you're not paying, you're the product. Well, it holds true with publicly available large language models, or LLMs, like ChatGPT. Everything you share and everything ChatGPT generates for you is retained by OpenAI as training data. Your private memos or private musings or essays are now available to be shared as part of content ChatGPT might generate later for others. LLMs are powerful ways to borrow other people's work. The hype surrounding ChatGPT since its launch in November is a tech story we will be studying for decades. Now is also the time to be studying the ethical implications of LLMs. And that starts with being aware of how your content is being used, just as you use other people's content. As always, we'll link to that full article from Lance Elliott in today's show notes. But for now, shifting to this week's conversation, today's guest is one of the most recognized investors and thought leaders in the conversational AI community. You've heard me say AI is the new UI and voice is the new app. Well, today we get to explore that one in detail with someone who I will consider the voice of the voice economy. Bradley Metrock is the CEO of Project Voice, author of the popular Substack newsletter This Week in Voice, which has more than 30,000 subscribers, and a general partner at Project Voice Capital Partners. Congrats to Bradley and the team on their recent announcement of their new rolling fund. Bradley's a proud citizen of the volunteer state of Tennessee. We are all honorary citizens. Certainly this week, we're taping this at the end of January 2023. Certainly mourning what happened in Memphis recently. Fair warning, you may be ready to move to Chattanooga after today's conversation, like I was after meeting Bradley for the first time. And by the way, he's also an Ironman in the world of podcasting, having just launched season 8 of This Week in Voice, a podcast he launched in 2017. Now, at this podcast, we're on about episode 180, going back to 2019. So I certainly admire Bradley's stamina. Without further ado, Bradley, it really is my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Let's get started by having you share a little bit more about your background and how you got into this space.
Dan, I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you for all that. I think that was encyclopedic. You're naming things even I forgot. I'm honored to be part of your show, and I'm appreciative of the opportunity. So I'm Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of Project Voice. We do a lot to accelerate adoption of conversational AI. You named a lot of it, and we live in an exciting time. I particularly liked your quote, your insight on ChatGPT. It's interesting just to think about ChatGPT from a privacy point of view and just sort of ruminate on how we as human beings think about privacy. We often think privacy is some sort of binary off-on kind of thing, when in reality it's a spectrum of utility versus desire to be secret, and away from the public eye. And the fact is, ChatGPT is so useful, so profound in what it brings to our, potentially brings to our lives. And I was just reading a real estate article of all things on realtors saying that their entire profession is forever changed thanks to ChatGPT, and realtors could never imagine going back without it. It just overwhelms any notion of privacy and it creates some interesting conversation. So I appreciated that insight. It's a joy to be part of your show.
Now, on This Week in Voice, you talk a lot about the state of conversational AI. If you could sum up some of the recent themes, how would you say, or where would you say we are as a community in terms of the maturity of that technology? And then perhaps more important, you're talking to a large audience of entrepreneurs who would love to get your insights on where there's room for innovating in the conversational AI space.
Yeah, I'm in the habit of looking at any technology, including conversational AI, on its impact industry by industry by industry. So it's a little bit much for me personally, maybe not for somebody else, to kind of look at it holistically. I can kind of cobble pieces together and conjure an image, but it's helpful for me to look at each industry on its own. And when you look at conversational AI's impact industry by industry, you start to see that there's a lot of opportunities that somebody's going to take advantage of over the next 3 to 5 years. Over the pandemic, conversational AI totally transformed the contact center to the point where if the words contact center are in your title, you, by definition, at this point, have to be a conversational AI expert, or at least know something about it, or have a trusted resource on your staff or something, because that industry has totally changed thanks to this technology. The industry that's being evolved rather quickly right now, as of this show, is the hospitality space, and even within that, the restaurant space. So the talk of restaurants and quick service restaurants, QSR, other types of restaurants, is we've got this labor problem, and we're not quite sure what to do about it. But it's a golden opportunity to at least have conversational AI be part of the solution. Oh, and at the same time, for the human beings we do have under our employ, it helps them not mess up orders. It helps them please the customer. It also helps upsell the customer a whole lot more, which just creates more money for everybody and more opportunity. That industry is changing every day quickly at this point with conversational AI. Banking, healthcare, media and entertainment, automotive and mobility, it's all being rewritten. And ChatGPT is a convenient flashpoint. It's a convenient place to affix our gaze, but the reality is much deeper than that. And if I were talking to a group of college undergraduates or business school students, which I occasionally will do, I will tell them that if they equip themselves with the skills around conversational AI, they're not going to have a problem getting a job the rest of their life. And I would tell anybody unemployed or underemployed or in transition the exact same thing. So it's all very exciting.
I mentioned in the intro that you recently launched Project Voice Capital Partners, the rolling fund, you and Mark and the team. And I believe you launched it with having announced a few of your first investments. Maybe you could talk about one that stood out. What was the pitch and why'd you invest?
Yeah. So Project Voice Capital Partners and the rolling fund, the rolling fund is an angel list creation where, you invest in a minimum of 3 companies a quarter and provides diversification. It provides ability for emerging managers, which is venture capital slang for people who haven't been doing this at all and don't have a track record like myself, the opportunity to gain a track record more easily than ever before possible. We're super excited about it. And we did announce the rolling fund with 2 investments that are going to be part of our Q1 2023 vintage of the fund. The first is called Applied Brain Research, which is a company out of Waterloo, Canada, that like several other companies that have gone on to be successful in this emergent technological domain, it started as an academic project. And the academic project was, how do we optimize a silicon chip for voice recognition and voice interaction? And these 2 co-CEOs, one of which has written a very well-known, well-read PhD level book on this topic, have patented their algorithm that optimizes that, optimizes the nexus of energy consumption versus voice recognition capability. We're excited to be part of what they're putting together. The other investment that we announced at the time of launching the fund is a company called AugX Labs out of your neck of the woods, out of California, and high pedigreed management team that's been involved in Hollywood entertainment the majority of their careers, and they have created a piece of software that enables anybody working in a Fortune 500 company all the way on down to owner of a single gas station or a mom and pop business of some sort to take a recording about their business, or really it could be about anything. Business is just the first use case. Take a recording about their business, a 30-second summary of their company, their product or services, and AugX Labs' generative AI solution creates a video out of nothing for the audio. It cobbles together not only your own assets, your logos and other stuff you have on your own computer, but Giphy and other licensed, royalty-free images and assets, and then also generative AI visuals and even videos from like Stable Diffusion and things like that. It's really remarkable. It really levels the playing field from a marketing point of view. There's a lot more they can do with it, which they will. So we're excited about that. And all in all, it's a great start, to the rolling fund. And there's been a lot of interest in that, and we're gratified about that.
Great examples of innovation. So you maintain the conversational AI market landscape map that has become quite a mushroom cloud of companies and new approaches. Maybe if you could first off, tell us about the vision behind maintaining that map, and then any kind of themes that you're finding having maintained it for a while now.
Yeah, so this space really cried out for visualization. And, we deal with a lot of different types of people, and some of them, it's Amazon Alexa and Apple Siri and Google Assistant. And though beyond that, why would anybody do anything? Like, what more is there even to do? Like, these companies have solved the problem entirely of conversing with technology. There's nothing else to do. So that's the limit. Like, that's the landscape, is just it's big tech, and that's it. Then on the other side, we deal with companies that obviously are much more familiar with the space, but even you could line up 100 CEOs of 100 venture-backed companies working in some area of conversational AI or another, and you would never, you probably wouldn't even get two of them to draw the same sort of map or visualization of the space. There's just no, shared vision on it. And part of the reason for that is because it's so new. But the other part of it is that there's not a shared vernacular or shared language around even discussing it. Like, if I say conversational AI, usually the next words out of my mouth are something along the lines of that includes voice, chat, and text. And because not everybody thinks that that's what that means. Conversely, when I talk about voice technology, it's implicit that could potentially also mean text or chat functionality at the same time, not just speaking with no imagery at all, to out into the void to a voice assistant. It could mean anything, any of that, or anything in between. So, once we figured out some sort of framework to position a number of these companies and how to express that some of them are industry vertical specific, while others are cross industry, dealing with banking, healthcare, and hospitality all at the same time, or attempting to. Once we figured out how to piece that together, the rest became easier. And the result has been that map has just gone everywhere. It's been fun to watch. It's been helpful to a lot of people. So we feel good about that too.
I mentioned in the intro, one of my cliches, AI is the new UI and voice is the new app. First, do you even agree with that? And then if you do you believe that there's a time in the future when voice will be the predominant computing interface as opposed to an alternative to quote traditional computing interface?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I think I'll kind of work backward and address that. So like voice is the new app. I agree with the sentiment. I don't know if I necessarily agree with like the words themselves. The great thing about voice is there's nothing new about it. It's the old app. In fact, it's the original app. When we're born, all we have is our mother's voice. Prior to being born, and then when we're born, and then we develop over time an inner voice that will guide us for the rest of our life. And there's no instruction manual. It's just kind of inherent with who we are, inherent to our humanity. So it's the original app, and that's what makes it exciting is in terms of its intersection with technology. And to answer your, another part of your question, which is there a point where voice overtakes other interaction models? I think absolutely that there is. And it doesn't have to be the end all be all. I think that, as human beings, we kind of want something to just come in and dominate. The QWERTY keyboard doesn't necessarily need to go away. Other types of modalities don't need to go away. But because voice is the original app, it's who we are as human beings, it's hard to imagine that like the QWERTY keyboard, for example, which somebody literally just made up one day, it's hard to imagine that over the long term that will remain competitive as AI continues to adapt and evolve and grow. Now, the smartphone is something different where, we kind of tap and swipe our way to what we want to do. But even then, we've seen that the smartphone is really one of the original homes of voice once voice assistant started to work. Once voice recognition started to get up into that 98 percentile, 95, 96, 98 percentile accuracy for most normal human speech, the smartphone quickly became a natural location for it, which to me screams out that it just works. It's like peanut butter and jelly. They work well together. So I don't foresee that changing either. And in terms of AI being the next UI, that was what you said, right? AI is the next UI. Yeah. I definitely, I think AI is going to be the next UI. I think AI is going to be the next a lot of things. And I think it's easy to look at ChatGPT and just assume it's going to be smooth sailing. That's what we do as human beings is, we won the championship, so we're going to win the next three, obviously. Something good happened, so the rest of the week's going to be great, obviously. ChatGPT is here. It's created a lot of innovation, so it's going to be smooth sailing, obviously. It's not going to be like that. AI, I think what we have seen, and I think the great lesson for society and our culture that we're all kind of learning together is these things show up quick, and they can change a lot in a hurry. And it can seem like overnight when it really wasn't, but it kind of was because we weren't paying attention to it. And so we have to better prepare ourselves for the future. And there's educational ramifications of that. There's future of work repercussions of that. There's regulatory repercussions of that. There's repercussions everywhere. So to me, that's what I take away. But ultimately, I mostly agree with your premise as it's stated and entirely agree in spirit.
Feels analogous to the early 2000s when there were technologies called mobile and called cloud, and they just enveloped all technologies. They no longer were apps in and of themselves. It's just everything had to have a mobile component and it had to have a cloud component. Now it feels like the mobile and the cloud of, call it, this decade is a combination of AI and specifically generative AI and conversational AI. Does that analogy hold up for you?
Yeah, it does. So I think that uh, it's interesting, and your question just really speaks to how we talk about these things. You know, the even the phrase generative AI, I kind of don't like it. Because I like it because it's well understood, and it provides us an ability to talk to each other and know what on earth the other person is talking about, which, like I said earlier, is not always a given in this space or in technology in general. But with generative AI, it's a little redundant for me. Conversational AI, as well as other types of AI, visual, I mean, any type of AI had generative capabilities for the most part already. And so this phrase generative AI kind of distorts the mainstream understanding of how far things have come and where the progress is being made, where the progress isn't being made. It's, oh, look, that picture kind of looks like me. The computer like just created that. How cool is that? Or look, I don't have to write essays anymore. Like the computer can do that. So with all the progress comes a little bit of distortion, and we've got to kind of work backward. But your question about how mobile and cloud kind of turned into this realm of AI, yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's probably what we're looking at. And it's also created a separate discussion, which I'll only dive down the rabbit hole a little bit, of what computing needs to be on the edge and what ought to be in the cloud. And that's an ongoing conversation. It's really interesting to me to see how people discuss that, who are much smarter on the topic than I am. But I do gravitate to topics just because I'm born and raised in the South. I was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, which is where I split some of my time, in addition to Nashville, as you mentioned. And of course, our namesake conference is in Chattanooga. So the South is full of places, along with the rest of the country, that don't have great internet access, where there's equity issues related to if you throw a bunch of stuff in the cloud. People may or may not be able to access that, perhaps at all, or at minimum with regularity. So there's interesting discussions going on with that as it relates to AI, and I find those interesting. But yeah, I would agree with what you said. For sure, that's kind of how the discussion is morphed.
You alluded to the need to mature regulatory frameworks and these topics around privacy and voice. As users, we've become very comfortable with the traditional computing paradigm, a QWERTY keyboard, texting, whatever it is. We initiate the interaction, and so that computing, the application, the service responds to something that we initiate. Increasingly, we're being warned as consumers that maybe voice AI is listening when we don't expect it to, and we're not quite sure what is it that whether it's Alexa or Siri are hearing and how they're using it. To what extent do you think some of these thorny issues will become an impediment to broader adoption of voice-driven technology?
That's a great question too. And if I knew the full answer to that, I'm sure I'd be sitting on a beach somewhere right now. It's going to be a massive impediment. And we just went through a global pandemic. One of the repercussions of that episode was the polarization of our culture. And one of those polars really likes government to do a lot of stuff. The other polar would rather not see that and sees minimal value in that. So it creates this backdrop for the emergence of AI, where it's a golden opportunity for there to be compromise, for there to be reconciliation is not exactly the correct word, but a spirit of collaboration, not just in government, really, but within government, and then between government and industry, on what's allowable and what's off limits. And I hope we get to that point. Biden released the blueprint the AI Bill of Rights blueprint that he and his team put together. And I found it very interesting that it was more, at least from my line of sight, conservatives praising that effort and progressives saying this isn't even close to good enough. Like, why did you do this garbage? So we got a lot of disagreements, and the fact is, we really haven't been tested yet. So we've seen things such as, like, in the straight up voice assistant side, we saw such proliferation of smart speakers that you knew something was going to happen, and a lot of stuff did. Whether it's in Mississippi, somebody gets murdered and that is recorded by the Alexa Echo device in the home. The FBI goes and subpoenas that, gets it. That person goes to jail, I believe, with a life sentence. These things challenge a lot about who we think we are. And there's numerous other examples. I could name them all day. So ChatGPT, we've only, we're in the first inning of ChatGPT. It almost hasn't even been around for, a couple of months or whatever, a month. And we haven't seen the repercussions of what that's going to do to challenge privacy, but it's coming. 2023 is not going to go by without a major challenge from ChatGPT and these large language models to our notion of privacy. And that's how you started the show. It's going to be a one step backward, two steps forward kind of progression for us for some time to come. And hopefully we can find some ways to have a shared vision for it.
Now, I'm a firm believer that AI is not the coming bot apocalypse. I think that I often cite the statistic from, I believe it's the World Economic Forum. AI will generate a net new 27 million jobs in the next 5 years. So you mentioned how, there's never been a better time, if you're a student, to be thinking about these technologies and thinking about the careers they'll create. What are some of those careers that, you're talking to a bunch of students who are thinking about how to not just learn about these technologies, but apply them in their careers? What are some of the career paths that we're not even thinking about because they don't exist yet, but will be common in a decade?
I love that question. So I was actually reading, it was last week, I think, somebody talking about how there's going to be a new job and he called it prompt engineer. So this would be somebody whose entire education and experience has prepared them to optimize ChatGPT. Just use ChatGPT. I mean, into the future, there will be all sorts of these things, but to optimize AI output. And, I find that interesting to think about, like who would be best at that. It's been interesting to see, really, since 2015, 2016, as Alexa came on the scene, what happened over that next couple of years with liberal arts majors. Big tech couldn't hire enough of them. You needed people with liberal arts backgrounds, communications majors, theater majors, English majors. These are the people who are doing conversation design. These are the people who are telling Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri, Samsung Bixby, and the gazillion other ones you never heard of, how to respond to whatever queries that the computer is going to get. So we've gone through this cycle of seeing technology brave humanity. I think we're going to go through it again. I think we're going to go through it a lot again, but I think ChatGPT and this new ushering in of conversational AI into the mainstream now, it's going to cause a lot of different thinking at the higher ed level, specifically, where it arrives at a time where higher ed is under siege. Half these colleges are expected to go out of business. They can't sustain themselves. The value is seen as marginal for a lot of them. Many of them are seen as predatory. It's an interesting time for this technology to show up, and the smart ones will figure out how to adapt and survive. And then we'll lose some, which is probably not anything to cry about. But ultimately, education will be changed. And, while prompt engineer is where my mind goes to, there's no telling who we're going to need to be doing what soon.
I think about the aging population and the increased dependence that population is going to have on voice assistants for drug delivery and, home assistants, human home assistants visiting them and scheduling and learning about your medication. And gosh, it seems to me like there's a whole career that needs to be set up around training that aging population to be able to use these voice assistants in an optimal way. I just can't even imagine how much additional years of valuable life it would add, these assistants would add if that aging population felt as comfortable, around, Siri or Alexa as they do around a traditional linear TV or something like that.
It's exciting times for people who are getting older and either find themselves in a senior living facility or not. But, the technology, we saw it with Alexa. There was a big study that came out in 2016, 2017 that the folks out in your neck of the woods with Front Porch, which is a big senior living organization, put together that showed that seniors who have access to voice assistants via smart speaker are less depressed, more likely to maintain their drug adherence to their prescription drug regimen, be more participatory in their community, whether it's at home or in a facility, and live longer. And it was part of a study on the dual peaks of depression and isolation in this country, which is senior citizens and college freshmen. They did the same thing. They put smart speakers into dorms and other environments with college freshmen, and they observed the exact same thing. They attend class more, greater disposition, sunnier disposition on average, better grades, better performance all the way around, and less suicide. So it was really eye-opening. And we're talking about the most basic of this technology with something like Alexa, where it's just you ask a question and it like gives you a response back, and that's it. So as rudimentary as the technology is and was, it has this profound impact on us feeling less alone. And it speaks to that humanity that I addressed earlier with your quote, voice as the app. The way this stuff touches us is a vast blue ocean that's mostly unknown, but the initial indications are very positive. So I think the trick for many of these companies will be to reduce friction as greatly as they can in terms of seniors. There's a lot of work going into that, but all in all, it's very exciting because people who lose their vision, people who lose their hearing, people who can't really control their muscle movements as well, and maybe have trouble typing. I've lived through all of that, like when my grandparents had seen it and all that. It'll be transformative and already is in a number of situations.
Fascinating. No better example of technology being used to make humans better. More up ahead. Now, Bradley, unbelievably, we're bad out of time. I know the time flew by, but you're not getting off the hot seat without answering one last question for me. So I mentioned that I'm ready to sign up to be your campaign manager when you run for a governor of the volunteer state. So give us the pitch. So entrepreneurs who are looking to set up camp in a so-called flyover state, perhaps like Tennessee, why should they consider not starting a tech company on one of the coasts?
It's hard to answer that question without delving into politics, and I really don't want to do that. I think that California and New York, we just did a big conference in New York City that we do every year. I'm in California all the time. Those states are slandered. They're great places. I don't have anything against them. I'm born and raised in the South. we made the choice to plant our namesake conference, the main event for conversational AI here in the United States, Project Voice, in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I'll tell you what, whereas Nashville is a real grab bag of conservative and liberal folks all managing to mostly coexist, Chattanooga is a very liberal city. It's a shockingly liberal city. And that might be why that it managed to turn itself from, in the 70s, on Time magazine's cover of the most polluted city in the United States, into now one of the most beautiful cities in the United States, where people flock who are more outdoorsy in nature, more liberal in nature. It's full of those type of people. And it's a place where we love to have the conference. And my sales pitch is why talk when you can just look at what we did. We went and planted the conference there. It's been there for years. It's never moving. We have a lot of people who want it to move. It's never moving. It's staying right there. And you can just take one more plane leg, sorry. But when you get there, you'll see why. And Tennessee's full of opportunity. And it's lower cost of living. And if you have family, it's not a bad place to raise a family. We're fortunate to live in a country where there's a lot of those. But I really have enjoyed being there. And, and we hope that if you're on the fence about such things, come to Project Voice 2023 and discover Tennessee for yourself.
Lock it. That's the stump speech right there. I'm ready to vote. Bradley, we're just scratching the surface about a lot of these topics. I hope maybe you'll come back another time and we'll continue this really important conversation.
Dan, it's an honor to be part of your show. Love what you do. Your company's great. Appreciate you inviting me.
You mentioned the conference. Anything else you want the audience to know about where to learn more about you and your work?
No, that's a great place to start, and if you have any interest in any of these topics at all, give the conference a long look. It'll be well worth your time and energy to get there.
And we'll link to it in the show notes. Well, that's all the time we have for today. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin of AI and the Future of Work, and we're back next week with another fascinating guest.